Hello everybody, my name's Steve Jordans and I was supposed to be chatting with you guys last night. I don't know what happened. We just got confusion over the time. I showed up an hour too late, I'm afraid. So massive apologies, but I created the talk and I was really looking forward to talking to all of you guys. So I thought I would just create a video of the talk and then invite you to email me any questions you might have. Not the same as hanging out with colleagues, I know, but it's the only thing I could think of at this point. So really, I just wanted to tell you a little bit of a story about my adventures in co-teaching. I should have named it my hesitant adventures in co-teaching and some of the pros and cons I've learned along the way. Okay, so I'm just going to jump in and get rolling. My introduction to co-teaching was not a good one, and it really, I think, left a shadow over how I thought about it for a long time. So specifically for a while at University of Toronto Scarborough, we had multiple sections of our introductory psychology class, and the way we would do it is we would have individuals come in and teach specific parts that they had expertise in. So the neuroscientist would talk about the neuroscience, etc. And the statistician person would talk about the stats part of the research methods, etc., etc. And so the idea, of course, was that students were always learning from an expert, which sounds great. But the unfortunate reality was there was what I would call a diffusion of responsibility because there were so many professors kind of associated with the course. None of them felt it was their course. None of them really felt any ownership. And so they would all kind of come in and do their thing, and teaching wise, everything was fine, but it really felt like something was missing. It felt odd to me. I didn't really know why at the time. I couldn't put my finger on it the way I can now, but we've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of research with students and others relating to education in general, and I'll just highlight this paper, although it really focuses more on online learning. The truth of this paper is true in all forms of learning. So what we did in this research was just look at all of the factors that contribute to making an educational experience powerful and how they all interact, which factors drive other factors. And there was almost like Lord of the Rings. There was one factor that controlled them all, one really, really important factor. And I wonder if you could guess what that is. If I threw this out to you and said, of all the things that go into crafting a great course, which factor do you think is the most important? Which factor feeds into almost all of the other relevant factors? Something called Instructor Presence. It's you. It's you. The idea is that students really embrace a class if they feel like the instructor is there and they care. And that's what was missing in that other team taught course, right? The instructors were there for now and gone. And they had no permanence, and there was no sense that they really cared a whole lot about the students' development and experience in that course. And I now realize this is the most important factor. So if you lose that, you're in trouble. And so I want to have this as sort of an overarching theme as I talk about some of the adventures. We always have to keep in mind this: when we are co-teaching, we have to not lose this instructor presence. It has to be there. If there's multiple instructors, can we make this stronger? Well, that would be really cool. If it feels like, hey, there's multiple instructors that are there and care, maybe that's even more powerful. But it's so easy to lose it with diffusion of responsibility. Okay, so let's have that as an overarching theme, and let me tell you the story. Once upon a time. So I told you, how I entered the introductory psychology kind of world, and that I did not like the team teaching very much, and I did something about it. This is going to sound kind of, I don't know, authoritarian, and maybe I have some authoritarian tendencies, and maybe that's a good thing to bring out because, team teaching with an authoritarian can be tricky. So this was February 2002. So it was the year in Ontario of what we call the double cohort. The rest of Canada had already gone to just 12 grades, but Ontario was still grade 13. Up until this time. And at that time, they decided there was going to be no more grade 13. And what that meant is we had two cohorts of students who wanted to get into the universities. The grade 13s who graduated, but now the grade 12s could also go to university. And the province very badly wanted us to accommodate all of these students. It was also at a time when the economy was not good and budgets of university were in fact being cut. And so, this is actually talking about a Ryerson perspective, and so what they said at that time is, we're going to increase our enrollment by 750, so a 7% increase, 17% of increase. That doesn't sound like much, but we don't know, what we don't know is where those 750 are going to go. Okay, so we were pushed to accept students, and then we had to figure out what to do with them, how to teach them. At UT Scarborough, this was my opportunity. What I recommended is we take those multiple sections of intro psych that were team taught, and we bring them together into one massive class that would be mine. Insert your evil laughter. Yeah, and so we have this is how we did things. I'm going to say pre-pandemic. I'm not going to get into the whole pandemic adjustment. That's almost a whole different talk. But pre-pandemic, this is how we did things. This is a 500-seat lecture hall. And literally from the point of view there was sometimes a video camera set up either here or on the other side, literally videoing me as I taught. And it was a student behind that video camera. So it wasn't automated. The student was actually following me around, zooming in, zooming out, occasionally zooming into the slides at the back. And what we said to students is, if you want, you can physically attend these lectures, but we're going to videotape them and immediately make them available online. And so if you would like, you can just wait, and they'll be online later that day, and you can watch the lectures online. And what we quickly found is that the math worked out really well, in the sense that we had about 2,000 students that wanted to take our intro psych class, but only about 400 really wanted to be at any given class. The other 1,600 seemed perfectly happy to watch online. In fact, they loved the flexibility. And so, of course, you didn't have to be there every time. You could choose class by class. But what we found is the classes were not overfull. There was enough room in the 500-seater. I could do my thing like I normally do it. But then again, we're reaching this full group of students. Most important for me, I'd beaten the team teaching. It was my class now. I could be there and I could care. I could do that kind of stuff. And I did. And no details, these details here are not critical, other than just to show you that as things moved on, this became my baby, this class. And I really wanted, it became my challenge. How can you teach almost 2,000 students in a really deep, rich way? And that's when I started embracing technology, started the Advanced Learning Technologies Lab, started creating technologies like PeerScholar. If you don't know about PeerScholar, you should. And other things, MTuner that you'll see here, Digital Lab Coat. And so we kept trying to develop this course, making it a deeper and deeper learning experience for students. Okay, so this does not sound like a team teaching talk right now, does it? It sounds more like somebody who's not a big fan of team teaching. At that point, I was not. And I'm still hesitant, as you'll see. The punchline of this will not be like, oh, go run out to team teach. It'll be time and a place, okay? So let's start that story. How did I get into team teaching? This authoritarian guy who likes to have control of his class. Well, it started because of my foray into the world of MOOCs, massive open online courses. I loved the concept of a MOOC. Anybody could have access to good lectures, irrespective of how much money they had or their geographic locations. I thought that was really cool. And I also loved this kind of stuff. There was all this talk that MOOCs were going to take down universities and change the way we educate. I've always been interested in educational innovation. It's a big part of what I do. And so I'm like, well, if that's where the stuff's happening, I want a foot in that pool. And so I agreed to be the first person, I think, at University of Toronto to mount a MOOC on Coursera, an Introduction to Psychology MOOC. And I started to learn about this MOOC world. And the real cool thing about the MOOC world, the thing that hooks you, is the thank yous, to be quite honest. That a lot of people reach out and say, hey, I could have never experienced this except for this MOOC, and I've learned a lot, and it's helped me, and you've pushed my interest in whatever. It's a way to have an impact on a global scale. That first MOOC that I've taught, now over 300,000 global students have enrolled in that, and all kinds of kind words. So that's that's kind of cool. So this was the first one I taught, Introduction to Psychology. I did not team teach that. I did it all on my own. Quite proud of it. And it's still there. It's still hoofing along and doing a great service, which is really nice. That's the other cool thing about MOOCs, by the way. You create them and they just live and they continue to have a positive influence without taking a whole lot of your time anymore. Okay, so that was all I had done originally. And then the pandemic started. And when the pandemic started, I realized that I was using a lot of what I knew about anxiety to help myself and help my family cope. And so very early on, I thought, wow, okay, I could be sharing this with the world. This is what MOOCs allow us to do. I reached out to my friends at Coursera and my friends at University of Toronto, and I said, hey, if I throw together a course, can we create another course? And this is the one we created, Mind Control. I know it sounds crazy. Managing your mental health during COVID-19. It was literally a course to teach people about what anxiety is. What is it you're feeling? And just it's a basic biological reaction. Let's understand that biological reaction. And then once we understand it, let's talk about some common sense things you can do to literally get control of your mind. So this is things like stop watching the news all the time. That will make you anxious. That will load anxious thoughts into your mind. Instead, why don't you watch some things that make you laugh? Or music stuff that makes you sing or whatever. By exposing yourself to certain stimuli, you can control your mind. And by controlling your mind, you can control the chemicals, hormones that are in your body. And it's those stress hormones that cause the damage. So I try to teach people techniques they can use to kind of deal with all that. Okay. This course was very popular. You see, you don't see the total yet here. 178,000 people have gone through this course since the beginning of the pandemic. And it literally kind of, if you've ever seen me on TV, it's because of this course. Reporters started finding me, started asking me to comment on things during the pandemic, and cool. All right. What does any of this have to do with team teaching? So far, nothing. This is where the team teaching starts. The other effect of having this course out there was the community saw it. And sometimes there were members of specific communities who saw it and said, oh, I love this. I just wish it were packaged differently for my community. And that started, that started on the next slide. Let me first just make a comment. And this is really a comment about this mind control course. And I got this course created and uploaded in 2 weeks. And so I like to kind of make this point because I think it highlights some of the issues on co-teaching as we go through. So I sometimes like to make this contrast between Neil Young and Pink Floyd, and I'm making the contrast in terms of what's called production values. Neil Young will sit somewhere and have a bunch of mics on and just play music and then ask somebody to turn that into an album somehow. And he doesn't mind if there's mistakes on it. In fact, he likes the mistakes. He considers it has to be authentic. It has to be, just as it sounded. And so he's a very low production value guy. I'm a Neil Young. I'm a low production value guy. On the other side is Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd would do their albums in studios and everything had to be pristine and perfect and, right to the stage with the whole stage show and all that kind of stuff. High production, right? Very high production. Costs a lot of money to do their stuff, etc., etc. I think I'm an odd individual in the teaching world because I'm a low production value individual. I'm happy just turning on a video camera and just talking to it. And somehow that seems to work for me. The students who watch my courses say, it feels like you were just talking to me. I was just across the table. And that's my style. And so I like to say that because, as we go into the team teaching world, style starts to matter. Styles can clash. In weird ways, etc. And so that's one of the things I think you have to think about when you're getting into team teaching. What is your style? How do you think about teaching? Because that can become relevant. Okay, so now let's start the team teaching story. When I feel I have all the necessary experience to craft and deliver a course, my primary approach is still not to co-teach. Why? Because I like control. I like crafting. I use the word craft very often. I like to craft the educational experience. And sometimes, too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. It makes things more complicated than if I can just do what I think is the best thing to do every step of the way. But also, this is my calendar. I just picked a day from back there, and what you'll see is that, basically, in a given week, I have very limited time to actually do anything. And in some of those spots, I'm doing emails, right? You have to respond to emails and keep up with those. And so if I'm creating a course, I have little pockets of time. And this is another reason why I think I'm still biased towards not team teaching, because I want to know, okay, Friday morning is when I'm working on that course and go. And that's the only time I have. And I pick these pockets. And so this allows me to both craft the course that I want, but also have a lot of control over when it gets done. And with this sort of approach, I can create a course in a relatively short time by really focusing on the times that I have to do this. This all becomes more difficult when you team teach. Okay, so let's get into the team teaching story. Finally, team teaching story. This was my first encounter. So this gentleman to your left here is Sergeant David Haynes, wellness officer for 31 Division. 31 Division is the part of Toronto where there's a lot of gang activity, a lot of violence, a lot of gun violence. It's a tough division. And Dave was looking after the wellness of his colleagues, his troops. And he called me one day. He said, "Hey, saw that course you did on Coursera. Very cool. I like it a lot. It's exactly what cops need." So he started telling me how difficult it is to be a police officer, how much anxiety they're dealing with every day, and that they need some support. But the course I created was too long. They work 12-hour shifts. They're not going to come home at the end of the day and watch a 30-minute video. So it was too long, and it went on. You'd have to watch a full 8 hours, I think, to get that entire course. He said, "Could we create something more targeted? Would I create something more targeted, something that would really fit the police context, and that would be just maybe 5 or 6 short 15-minute videos? Could we kind of capture the critical stuff in that sense?" And I mean, Dave's heart was as big as a lion, as they say. I kept hearing all these stories, and I said, "Yeah, man, let's do it. But I need your help." Okay. And so this was one case where I understood I don't have all the expertise now. There's a lot I need to understand about the police context in order to do a course like this right, and I just don't have that understanding. Dave does. And so what I said to Dave is, you have to be sort of my cultural translator here. Here's what we'll do, and this is what we do. I will create draft videos for you, thinking, with my best thoughts in mind. You look at those and you give me untarnished feedback on what does and doesn't work. And so we worked this way, and it was fantastic. And let me give you one example. There's one point where I was talking about how difficult the demands of being an officer are, and how high society's expectations are in terms of how well they can control their basic fight flee response, which is a hard thing to control. And I use the term, it's an unreasonable ask. And Dave's heard that term, and I used it just kind of in passing. And Dave's like, whoa, buddy, that word, that term, unreasonable ask, that will resonate so much with police officers. They will get that, and that will help them kind of understand why, they need to train. They need some sort of skills in order to meet this unreasonable ask. And so with his sort of emphasis, I was like, wow, you're right. And that became the title of that video, I believe. And now when I give keynotes to police officers, that is the title of the keynote. The Unreasonable Ask has a lot of power. So Dave was really good at sort of, picking out, emphasize that, de-emphasize that, don't talk about that at all. And we would go through and produce these videos, and we ended up with a course that cops find really, really useful. I could not have made this course without Dave. I would have been a well-intentioned egghead talking to cops in the wrong way. thanks to Dave, I could speak to them in the language they understood with a sensitivity to what they're actually experiencing. Dave was critical. He didn't really co-teach. He's not listed as a professor, but man, every chance I get, I point out the power that he had on that. So this is a great example of what co-teaching can give you, right? An ability to be good in a context where you couldn't be good otherwise. And that's one example. So let me just give you the other example as we step through. At the same time, and this is all during the pandemic, Coursera said, hey, there's a demand for certain kind of courses. And one of them is a demand to help frontline healthcare workers, again, manage their anxiety, manage their stress. Well, once again, what do I know about the life of a healthcare worker? A little bit, but not enough to fool them into thinking that I actually understand what they're dealing with. And so I happened to have done a webinar, co-taught a webinar with Dr. Heather Gordon. So I did my thing, she did her thing. I thought she was fantastic. And so Heather oversaw, she's moved on, but the wellness of all UHN, University Health Network staff, imagine that. I mean, hundreds of healthcare workers. She's the one that's trying to keep them all okay during a pandemic and everything that went on, right? What a difficult job. And so I knew I needed her, and I knew it had to be different than the Dave thing. I didn't just need a cultural interpreter here. Heather was on the ground. She was doing stuff to help the mental health of healthcare workers. We needed that. We needed those concrete examples. We needed her voice. So this is, proper team teaching now, where Heather and I got together and said, I just reached out and said, hey, would you like to do this course with me? And she said, absolutely, that'd be great. I'm kind of busy right now. Like, I understand you're busy. I will do everything I can to remove as much work from your plate as possible, and to also be very sensitive to what you're going through, during this period. And so we had those discussions. We decided to do it. It was difficult, and it was fantastic at the same time. Most words I've ever had on a slide here, but I want to hit some of this stuff. I don't usually have this many words on a slide. There's a lot that we went through. So this was real co-teaching, and it was full of challenges. First of all, just think of how busy Heather was. I think I'm busy, but I'm busy doing stuff for sort of me. She was busy caring for so many other people, many of whom were crashing. We're running into real difficulties. So not only was she busier than I was, but it was real heavy emotional work. And I had to learn that when she said not today or not this week, that was that. Okay, so that was, the first thing I guess I would say is you have to kind of understand the person you're working with, and try as well as you can to be sensitive to their constraints. She had a lot of constraints, and I had to learn that early. Don't push. It's going to take, at some point I realized this course is not going to happen in 2 weeks, not like the other course did. This is going to be a slow, gradual process. Now, Heather was also new to offering video-based courses. She walks in and gives, sessions, and she even gave some webinars, but the idea of producing a video-based course, she just hadn't done it, and she hadn't used any of the technologies that are associated with that. So that was a challenge, because we had to produce these videos, edit them, upload them to the Coursera platform, add assessment questions to them, all that kind of stuff. And I realized early on, that's mine. That's all on me. And so what I was able to do was get a little bit of funding, because we pushed this out to our alumni. So the alumni office was willing to offer a bit of funding, and that was enough to make sure that Heather had the computer and software that I have. And then I could teach her how to use that. And she could just send me those files, and I could do all the editing and everything from there. So we had to sort that out early, and I had to spend some time, and just imagine someone who's, technology can be annoying, a new computer can be annoying, a new software can be annoying at the best of times. But imagine you're trying to help a bunch of people get through a pandemic, a bunch of healthcare workers, and then you come home at the end of the day and you got this U of T guy saying, okay, let's talk about using ScreenFlow to capture whatever. It was challenging for her, and it took us a while to get everything smoothly going, but we did. And that was cool. That was a big hurdle. Now, The next hurdle kind of came to, crafting that course. How do we do this? So Heather came at this issue from a very applied perspective. She was on the ground doing things to help people. Anything from creating what's called respite centers in hospitals, places where healthcare workers can go and, do some meditation or singing or see a gratitude wall or all other sorts of things. And she knew about all of these things really well. That's where she lived. I was, of course, much more in the psychological theory and research data world. What that meant is we didn't share a common vocabulary. And it was difficult then for us to think about creating the course because we didn't necessarily see all the points of our connection, because she lived in one world, I lived in another, and we didn't know each other's worlds very well. And it took us a long time to kind of see that connection. And sometimes when you're trying to create a course, if you can't see that connection, you can't have a bird's eye view. So it was really hard for us to figure out how to interweave these things. We'd agreed to offer this course. We knew it could bring value, and we just said we have to find a way to make this work. But it was very difficult, I have to say, during that normal brainstorming phase. And I also have to say there's times I was like, I wish I could just do this on my own. It would be so much easier. It would have been easier. It wouldn't have been the same course. So let me just give you a sense of what we went through as it might guide some of you. So yes, I got her all set up technically. And so that was great. And then when it came to course design, I was trying to figure out how are we going to do this? So here was my first thought, plan A. I would create a video. So I understood that Heather didn't necessarily have a full grasp on the psychology stuff. But maybe if I did a video to describe some, how anxiety works or something like that, then she could riff off of that. She could watch my video and say, oh, and here's how we're doing this in the hospital, so that she could give specific examples. And I don't know if this is an academic's way of thinking of it. Start with the theory, start with the big, and then go to the specific examples. But I can tell you this, it didn't work. That just didn't work. Heather had a hard time knowing where to take my videos. And again, let's keep in mind that on the relative stress index, while we were both stressed, she was way more than I was, right? And I understood that. And I understood if something's got to give, it's got to be me that's got to give. And so we went to plan B, which ultimately worked beautifully. So in plan B, I said, can you just take some of those things you're doing and kind of try to group them into things that you think are related in some way, and then describe one of those groups in a video, those collection of interventions, so to speak. And so she would do that. She would describe something like, for example, maybe a peer support line that they have, where they had this connection set up that the people who were feeling stressed out could connect with others, talk things through. They could do this either anonymously or in person, etc. So she talked about how they set that whole thing up. And that allowed me to talk about the importance of social connection to physical health, to mental health, etc. So we turned it back the other way. Start with the concrete example, and then I gave the more general theory. Why does that work? Well, here's why it works. Let me allow you to understand your brain and what it's doing, and here's how it works. And by the way, that example is one instance of this, but there might be other ways of harnessing that as well. And so we ended up, having this ability of having people understand specific things they could do, but also the more general idea behind why they work. And that general idea allowed them to maybe conceive of other ways of applying that concept. So that worked really well. And we ultimately banged out the course this way. Her just kind of creating those next videos, me watching the videos, creating the psychological theory. I created assessments that went with everything as we went through, added those assessments. And, in the end of this, I have to say, I learned so much. And I didn't learn just what Heather was doing. I really learned a lot about psychology. What I thought I came in with the expertise in, she would come up with something like laughter yoga. We use laughter yoga in our stuff. And I'm like, laughter yoga? Okay. Interesting. Why does laughter yoga work? And so I would learn a little bit more of the psychology of laughter and what's going on in the body and the release of hormones and all this kind of stuff. And so I was really being pushed by her initiatives to learn and then describe, why that would work, etc. And so it was really kind of exciting. And there were other advantages that kind of came out of it too, other benefits. So first of it, learners heard two distinct perspectives delivered by people with expertise. So that's, almost back to that thing I didn't like, right? Where you have people with expertise delivering their sections. But there was a critical difference here. Across the videos, there was a rapport that developed across Heather and I. She would reference my videos. I would reference her. We would talk about things like gratitude, and we both happened to say, how grateful we were to be working with each other and learning from each other. And so there was a sense that, we weren't just separate experts doing our thing. We really, I think, were good at saying, hey, we both want to help you, and we're able to help you at different levels. And so we're going to tell you what we can to help you, but we're also going to show that connection, and we're going to show that positivity and everything that's so important to our mental health. And I think that really came through. And so that notion of instructor presence, are they there and do they care? I think we nailed that. I think we may have, I don't want to say doubled it, but I think they certainly feel like both of us were there and both of us cared. And that worked out really well. There was this nice mix that learners got of real clear on-the-ground examples, not just hypothetical examples that some academic kind of creates. This could be like this. It's like, no, this is what we're doing in this hospital. And nurses really like the gratitude wall, for example, where they're seeing notes from people saying nice things about, et cetera, et cetera. These were real on-the-ground examples that they could put into place in their healthcare institution right away. But they also understood why that worked, what the science behind that was. And so I think it was a great mix of the concrete and the abstract that they got from that. And again, I already mentioned this, but we were very careful to model the principles we discussed as we went through, to really give the students an example of the impact they had. There's one video where Heather's talking about the power of music, giving yourself a music break, and to do so in a silly way every now and she's got, I don't know, some sort of hat on and a noisemaker, and she's got Mac the Knife playing, and she's singing along, doing stuff, and you feel good when you watch it. You just feel good when you watch it, and you end up saying like, okay, yep, I can see how that could give me a break at some point during the day. This is just the bottom line. We created a course neither of us could have created on our own. It just brought together these different perspectives and different expertise to create something that was greater than the sum of its parts, in my mind, a gestalt kind of course. This is why you co-teach, right? These are the examples why you co-teach. So just sort of wrapping this all up then, here are my three sort of things I'll highlight, but I think there was more interwoven through all that. But the first thing is pick your spots. I don't think co-teaching is good all the time. I think if you have all the expertise you need and you feel good about teaching a course, it can be a heck of a lot easier sometimes to create it yourself. But co-teaching is especially powerful when you have these parties bringing different expertise, experience and expertise. Then you can get that gestalt thing, that whole being greater than the sum of the parts. And that's what you want to look for the co-teaching thing. Choose the right partner. You are going into a relationship. It may take you months to create that course. It took Heather and I quite a while when all was said and done, because I had to keep being sensitive to all the demands she was facing every day. It's almost like you're in a relationship with this person. You have to, get to the end and have a product you want. So make sure you have a sense of style. This is back to that notion of style. Do I think we can jive? Because if we start acting as independent entities, teaching our thing, that instructor presence is going to be gone. Okay? And that's critical. We have to be working as a team. We have to be working almost with one voice. Who can I do that with? That's critical to the success. Accept the challenge. It is harder to co-teach than it is to teach. It just is. It takes longer. It's more complex. It's frustrating. There's times you think, why don't we just do it this way? And the other person is like resisting and whatever. And then sometimes, you follow that resistance and end up at a better place. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm glad we didn't just do it that way. But you're going to go through a lot of that angst as you go through. Understand that going in. This is difficult. Anytime humans work together to create something, it's difficult. Okay, you have to negotiate those human interactions to make it happen. Truth. Okay. And then the third thing is your mindset. I recommend, so as some of you know, I'm part of an edtech startup with Peer Scholar, and one of the things you realize is that when you're working with multiple perspectives and multiple people are all involved in something they all feel ownership of, and you want that, right? That's point one. You want all the instructors to feel like they own that course. But that means they have ideas of what they want to do. Sometimes your ideas will win out and you'll kind of follow your ideas. Sometimes you have to allow other ideas to dominate yours. And sometimes you have to totally pivot. So, the example I'll give you is the one for plan A or plan B with Heather, right? Plan A being, I'll lead with the psychology and you give the specific examples. That wasn't working. It just wasn't working. Even though I understood how it could work in my mind, it wasn't working. Heather didn't understand how that would work, and it just didn't work. And so we had to ditch it. You had to put the big X through and say, okay, let's think of another way. That's hard to do. But that's the mindset you have to have. You have to be willing to pivot, willing to let everybody have a voice, willing to take the back seat every now and then and let somebody else's ideas drive the show, etc. It's a very much more fluid, organic kind of approach you need to make a team taught course come to life. Because it's ultimately what's going to make that course succeed or not is how well all of you speak as one to the student. And in order to do that, you have to really become a team. So in fact, I don't even like the term co-teaching as I see this. I prefer team teaching, because even if it's two, you have to be a team of two to make that work. Okay. Okay, all right, there we go. Thank you. I have no idea how long I just talked to my computer here by myself, but that's the talk I wanted to give you guys last night. Again, I feel just embarrassed and whatever for not showing up at the right time. I have no idea how that happened, but it is what it is. I hope this video was a suitable hand-drawn facsimile of what you might have received. There is my email address. Please, I love connecting with colleagues. If you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to reach out. And better late than never, maybe. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.